Well, hey, Vision. Amen. Okay, I got some good news for you today, and I got some energy. So we got some time to spend together. And Mayor's like, woo, okay, let's get ready for this. Because we're starting this new series, whether you're in the house, whether you're on Facebook Live, the next 8 weeks, we got this series called Story Makers. Because do you want your story to matter? I'm like, do you want your life to matter? Tell me. Yes. I think you do. I mean, everybody wants their life to be impactful, to matter, to not be boring, vanilla, to not be painful. You want it to be successful, honestly, fun, joyful, victorious, all these different pieces of what our story can look like. For 8 weeks, we're taking a look at one person in the Bible each week, 6 men, 2 women, and throughout our summer, we've actually got 4 different communicators who'll be up here, different guys from here at Vision. They're going to talk to you about what God is teaching us about story makers in the Bible. Here's the cool thing. Not only does God want your story to thrive, He wants you to be a part of His big story. No matter what age you are, no matter where you've been, if it's your first time in church or first time in a long time, God wants your story to shine. So again, if you got your takeaway card, pull it out. If you got the Vision app, pull it out and get your notes ready, because what I'm going to tell you today about this guy named David is going to help you on your story. This guy David, who, has anybody ever heard the story of David and Goliath? Okay, like anybody pretty much in America or around the world maybe has ever heard of, never been to church, but you heard of David and Goliath. You're watching a ball game and they're like, oh man, it's one of those David and Goliath stories, a little team against a big team, or, in business, they're like, this little guy, can he make it? It's like a David and Goliath story. So we kind of know the setting for this guy named David. But if you're new to church, you say, but Matt, I really don't know anything else about David. Today is your day to learn about this guy, David, who went from what I call like the pasture to the palace. I mean, he went from a place where he was just kind of like, miring out here doing something. Hey, nothing wrong with pastures. I mean, my wife, she oversees 6 pastures, or Bit of Hope Ranch. I love pastures. But when you got dreams and you feel like God has got a plan for you to end up in the palace and you're in the pasture, you say, how do you get from point A to point B? Well, the way you do it is you walk with God and you realize that you are marked. That literally, that God, when you enter into a relationship with Him, He marks you for greatness. He marks you for success. He marks you with hope. Yeah. So if you have any interest in that and think that could happen in your life, say, I'm marked. I'm marked. I mean, like you believe it, like God's doing something in your life, say, I'm marked. I'm marked. Okay, because I believe this. And what I want to figure out this summer is I'm taking July and August to kind of unpack this concept of how do I live out that marking in my life if God has marked me for more than just being bored or mellow or discontent or unsuccessful. He wants to work in my life in a way that's powerful and memorable because I'm marked. So if you believe that, say I'm marked. I'm marked. Okay, let's dig into it. Because the story of David, it actually starts before him with this guy named Saul. Now, I don't want you to get confused. There are 2 Sauls in the Bible. And when I was really young in my walk, I thought they were the same guy until I realized they're like generations apart. Okay, so in the New Testament, this guy named Saul who becomes Paul, that's another guy. This one we're talking about for a minute, he is King Saul, the guy who was chosen to be the first king of Israel when the Israelites said, God, we want a tangible king. We want somebody here we can see and touch. And God said, I'm your king. They said, we want somebody we can see. So God says, okay, I'm going to call this guy Saul. And God marks him for greatness. We see his story starts in 1 Samuel 10. It's speaking of Saul. It says, the Spirit of the Lord will come powerfully upon you, upon Saul, and you will prophesy with them. You'll be changed into a different person. Once these signs are fulfilled, do whatever your hand finds to do, for God is with you. So that sounds like good news. God has marked Saul. He's got this path he's on until he gets off this path. He makes some bad choices. Honestly, he stops listening to God as clearly. He stops following Him so faithfully. I want you to realize you can lose your marking. You can't lose your salvation. Of course, back in Saul's time, they didn't know the word salvation. I mean, Jesus had not come yet, so people weren't saved yet, but they came into a relationship with God. They couldn't lose that, but you can lose your marking. That if God puts a mark on you and says, I'm marking you for greatness, and then you fumble that, or your decisions or things you do fumble it, God says, I'm going to kind of Photoshop that picture of you and take your mark off and mark somebody else, because God wants people who believe they're marked, and He's going to do amazing things in them and through them. But Saul, we see in 1 Samuel 13, this guy Samuel came to Saul. Samuel's the prophet. He said, Saul, you've done a foolish thing. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command. Literally, what's happening here is Saul is losing his mark. So the first thing I'm seeing in this is, guys, we don't need to get complacent when we truly feel like God has marked us or anointed us or touched us and said, I'm going to do something in your life. And you're like, good, okay, I just got to sit back now. And just kind of ride this train. No, you can lose that mark. Again, you can't lose your salvation, but you want God to work through your life in a way that is powerful. You got to believe you're marked. So if you believe it, and if you go there with me today about David, say, I'm marked.
I'm marked.
Okay, let's figure this out. So David, he comes on the scene. You're like, okay, we know it. He's got Goliath, and there's like stones, and there's heads chopped off and stuff, right? Okay, we'll get there in a minute. But I want us to understand that when God puts a calling on your life and he marks you, there are things that have to happen in you in private before it's going to happen in public. And this is hard in our generation because, with us, it's, hey, post it, hashtag it, show people, Facebook Live it, talk about it. You have to see what I'm doing. I'm not against those type of things. I'm just saying in your walk, there has to be time when it's you and God. Yes. And you're in private. And God is shaping you and taking you on a journey, literally from the pasture to the palace, and it happens in private. Now, this thing about David, he has this marking. He's trying to figure out, God, what do you want to do in my life? And this guy Samuel, he comes together with Jesse and all his boys. Well, we thought it was all of his boys, but David wasn't there. And Samuel comes in and says, okay, one of you guys is the next one who's going to be marked and used by God. And Jesse, the proud dad, brings his boys in there. They go through each of the boys, the big, tall, strong, handsome one, the smart one, the whatever one. And God's like, Samuel, that's not it. Samuel, it's not him. It's not him. And Samuel gets done, look at all these boys and says, Jesse, I must have missed this thing. Is this all your boys? And Jesse said, well, there's one more. There's David, but he's out in the pasture. He's out there taking care of the sheep, taking care of the animals. And Samuel said, well, bring him on in. And he brings him on in and lines him up. And God whispers in Samuel's ear and says, that's the guy I'm putting my mark on. And I want to understand how David goes from that moment to not only slaying Goliath, but being used as a king that had incredible success, incredible influence, a man they said was after God's own heart. And yes, he had times he fell, and other times he rose, but overall his life was of incredible impact and success because he was marked. So this guy David, he comes on in, he gets picked, he gets marked. And if you feel like God's saying to you, okay, I've marked you for greatness, I want to do something in you, through you, and you're like, well, what would that look like, God? Hey, maybe it's leading your family. Maybe it's actually injecting Jesus into your home in a way you've never seen before. Maybe it's in your finances saying, God, I want to see you work in a way in my finances that it all changes and I'm not locked down by financial stress the rest of my life. Maybe it's in a relationship. Maybe you're single. Maybe you're saying, God, I believe you marked me and I'm going to find a godly spouse. You're going to do this in my life. Lead me there. And God says, those are good things. I want to do them. And David says, okay, I'm marked, God, I'm ready. Take me to the palace. I'm ready. And he gets sent back out to the pasture. Because God had some refining to do in David because David wasn't ready. And you're saying, I'm ready. And God's saying, no, you're not. Because I got to see your heart. I got to see how you're going to steward things. I got to see how you're going to listen to me. I got to see how you're going to prioritize and spend time with me. And David gets sent back to the pasture. And he waits. And he waits. Now, no day he gets called. They say, hey, come on in, because the King Saul, he's being tormented by an evil spirit. Come on in. And David's like, yes, okay, I'm being called to the palace. This is my day. This is my time. You want me to pick up some weapons? You want me to go on the battlefield, do whatever? I said, no, just play the harp. He's like, what? Nothing against, hey, if you play the harp, no offense, okay? But David's like, I want to do something. I've been marked for greatness. God says, this is what I want you to do. Play the harp. He plays it faithfully. He's like, okay, God, now I'm ready. They send him back to the pasture. I want to encourage you that if you are in the waiting season, God is working. You just got to be paying attention. Because David, he goes back out in the pasture. And we'll find out later, man, he was killing bears and other things that are attacking. He's learning skills. He's learning how to sling rocks. He's learning how to trust God. He's spending time with him. What's happening in the pasture is not wasting time. It's just waiting time. So I want to encourage you, if you feel like God is wasting your time, he's not if you're listening for him. So the story continues. 1 Samuel 17. Most of us know this story. Big Goliath, the bully, taunting the people of Israel. On one hill, you got the Philistines. On the other hill, you got the Israelites. And every day, Goliath would come down the middle of it and taunt. Now, this is the way we look at taunting in our lives. This is when people say to you, you can't do that. There is no way you can lead your family. And there's no way you could ever get out of debt. There's no way you're going to find a godly spouse. There's no way you're going to change careers. You can't go back to school. Taunting comes at us these days like that. And that day, Goliath came out, and he was taunting them, saying, hey, I'm big, I'm bad, I'm scarier than you. Send somebody out, we'll fight. And everybody was scared. Even these guys who were supposed to be walking with God were scared, and they all would come back and cower in fear. So one day, David, his dad says, hey, David, I'm going to send you out to the battlefield. David's like, yeah, come on, give me some swords and some stuff to kill with, whatever. You know what he gives them? He gives them some sandwiches. Anybody here like grilled cheese? Everybody's like, grilled cheese. That's not grilled cheese. He's like, okay, give me some cheese, give me some bread, take us to your brothers. He's like, what about the weapons and stuff? Said, hey, just take this out there. He goes out to the battlefield. He gets to the battlefield, pass out the food. He's like, yeah, man, I want to do something. I've been marked. I'm ready to do this. Here's Goliath come out, taunting. Everybody's shaking. And David's like, what? You guys really scared of this guy? So, man, if you've been hearing what God's telling me in the pasture, man, God, he's the unstoppable God. You know, God's the one, man, he could, with all things, it's possible. He is powerful. Why are you guys scared of this person? But everybody's scared. So he starts asking. He's like, okay, what would happen if somebody, killed this guy? And all the guys are like scared, like, oh, okay. Well, actually, if you could kill him, then, man, you get this stuff from the king and all these gifts and all this whatever. But if you don't, man, we're going to be taken captive by them and killed by them. And in fact, what happens is one of David's brothers, one of the guys who'd been in the original lineup, said, hey, man, what are you doing? Why are you asking? You can't kill a giant. You can't fight. Man, all you've been doing is hanging out with sheep and animals and creatures in the pasture. You can't do this. It was another degree of taunting. It was like another obstacle David's facing. And David, he decides he can beat him. He says, me plus God can do anything. And they're like, what? Really? You got that kind of faith? He said, yeah, man, I can do this. Well, they take him and he goes over to Saul. Remember, King Saul. And with King Saul should have been the guy who was going out to fight Goliath. But remember, his marking had been taken away. Courage taken away, confidence taken away. I'm not exactly sure. But David has this marking. And he goes into Saul, and he talked to Saul after he talked to his brother. Now, when he talked to his brother, Eliab was his name. When he talked to his brother, Eliab, he had some options about what to do when he was taunted by his brother. If you got your takeaway card, this is helpful for you, because when we face that taunting, we got some options. The first thing we can do is we can shrink back and freeze. Like literally, we feel that pressure. People say, now you can't lead your family. You can't get out of debt. You can't change jobs. We shrink back and we freeze. So David could have shrunk right back and just still on the sidelines and said, okay, I'll stand here and wait, see what God does. Second thing is he could have shrunk back and fled. He could have said, okay, I'm out of here, man. I'm going back to the pasture where I belong, I guess. You tell me that's where I belong. I should just go back there and belong. The third thing he could have done is he could have punched him in the face. Now, you're laughing, but listen. When your obstacles come your way, the family members that say, why are you pulling your Bible out, Dad? We don't want to talk about that. Or why are you even looking at changing careers, going back to school? You can't do that. Why are you trying to stay pure and find a godly spouse because you're single? You can't do that. Everybody's doing it. Understand, you can either freeze, you can flee, or honestly, you could lose your temper. Blow up at your family. Hey, why don't you guys follow me? Come on, I'm trying to do something here. You could blow up, say, this is too hard. I can't go back to school. I can't change jobs. I can't stay pure. I can't do this. And you let your temper take over, and you laugh about him punching his brother in the face. He didn't do that. But he could have. You think God would look at that and said, that's not the guy I marked. So you laugh, but you either freeze or you flee or you blow up, or honestly, you push forward with God. You press forward and say, God, I don't like how I'm feeling, but God, I know you're bigger than this. God, I don't like what they're saying. I don't like the fear that's welling up, but God, we can do this together. And you press forward with God's plan. And David, he heard it from his brother, then he went in the palace, and honestly, he kind of heard it from Saul, because Saul was like, David, hey, this is great. You're ambitious. It's great you're spending time with God. It's great you want to move forward. It's great you think you're marked. But man, look, nobody can stand up to this giant. And standing there with Saul, I think David had the choices again to, shut up and freeze, shut up and flee. I don't think he was going to punch the king in the face, because that would not go well. But I do think he just could press forward and say, Saul, respectfully, I can do this. And this is, again, where part of your shaping comes in, that when you're facing obstacles, how do you respond to it? And this is shaped by your time with God in private. That you say, hey, I'm still going to press forward. I'm going to press forward. Well, think about David. And I want to encourage you this week, because I can't go through the whole story of David, because we got 16, 17, 18, all the way to the end of 1 Samuel. What you see in David's story that can parallel to your life is he faces obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. In fact, I counted somewhere around 12 of them that just jumped out to me like that, where he's not invited to that original party. He's eventually called in the palace, but to play the harp. He's sent back to pasture. He just brings food. He's taunted by Goliath. He's called out by his brother, called out by Saul. Even at times when he's getting ready for battle, they're trying to put stuff on him that isn't the right stuff. And then once he becomes king, he's faced with pride issues, all these things, all these obstacles to try to prevent him from living out God's marking. But we got to figure out how to get past the obstacles. So if you want to try, say, I'm marked. I'm marked. I mean, like you really want to see God work in your life, say, I'm marked. I'm marked. Okay, because I've been saying this to God, saying, God, I believe I'm marked, and it has nothing to do with me being a pastor. It's that Matt Vanderbilt has a marking on his life because I want to see God work. And I want to go from the pasture to the palace, whatever that looks like. It doesn't have to be on a stage. It doesn't have to be on Facebook Live. It doesn't have to have $1 million in my bank account. But God has a calling for you because of your marking. And this comes down to turning obstacles into opportunities. It's about perspective. It's about when you, as a man in your house, say, okay, guys, we're going to try reading something in the Bible tonight. Pastor Matt read us something about David. We're going to read a little bit about David and talk about it. And your family members say, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know the Bible, Dad. We're not going to spend time with you. And they scatter. And remember, again, you can freeze, or you can flee, or you can blow up in temper, or you can press forward. When someone's laughing at you because you're striving for purity, you're striving to get out of debt, you say, okay, that's another obstacle. But actually, God, this is an opportunity you're going to shape in me, my trust in you. This is an opportunity where I'm going to see you work like I've never seen you work before, God. I'm going to turn these obstacles into opportunities. So how do you make it through those obstacles? Okay, has anybody faced any obstacles this year? Anybody fallen off a ladder and had like all these ribs shatter, and you're like, ah. And Andy, I was on a ladder on Thursday, man. I was thinking about you all day long, brother. Like, don't. And you're thinking about in your life, you feel like you're marked, and you want to move forward, but you keep facing obstacles. How do you get past them? Well, here's one thing you can do. You focus on the last thing that you know God told you to do, and you spend time in his presence. And you're like, man, that's not like real deep. That's not real complicated. That's not real philosophical. It's not. It's simple. That when you don't know what to do and you don't know where to go or how you're going to make it past the obstacle, you say, okay, God, what's the last thing you told me to do? Okay, you told me to pull out my Bible and try this, or you told me to arrange my finances, or you told me to stay away from that club. That's the last thing you told me to do, so I'm going to stay on that, and I'm going to spend time in your presence. I can do that. I can do those two things. And God looks at you just like he looked at David, and he said, David, I see you out there. I see you out there in the pasture being prepared in private, because this marking has so much potential to it. The other Saul, the guy who turned into Paul, generations later, he would write about this when he sent out a letter to the church at Philippi, and he said, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion in Christ Jesus. That should encourage you that when you are facing obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, and you're like, God, how do I make this into an opportunity? He said, look, I'm refining you. I'm shaping you, Matt. I'm doing this in you because I'm going to carry this on to completion if you stay on journey with me. I said, God, I don't know if I can make it. Well, in Romans 5, Paul wrote about it. He said, the sufferings, and I know you're suffering. And listen, if you're paying attention right now and you're saying, Matt, I know what suffering is. I know it is when my air conditioning's going out. I know it is when I feel like I'm going to get divorced and be alone. How can I possibly make it and find a godly spouse? My kids, I'm trying to raise them right, but God, this is really tough. This is suffering. Paul said suffering is a part of a process. And suffering, it produces perseverance, which produces character, which produces hope. You're like, I want some hope. Yeah. And God is saying to you, you are marked and you have hope in this. Your suffering is not being wasted. Amen. It's an obstacle that will turn into an opportunity. And I got to believe this because I can't manufacture this on my own. I can't manufacture hope that says, God, I want my life to matter more. I don't want to just survive and just like limp through this thing. And imagine if that's how David felt at times out there in the pasture. And he's like, God, you said you got a calling on my life. You said you marked me, and I'm out here throwing stones at bears. God, I'm out here doing stuff. And then, boom, he gets in front of Goliath. Boom, he uses that in that moment. You know, David's out there, managing animals, leading sheep. You're like, that doesn't sound too much fun. Honestly, it's like leading people. People bite, sheep wander off, people wander off. David gets into leadership one day. He's like, wait a second. I'm used to trying to corral and move a certain direction. God says, I was training you. You were paying attention. So I want to encourage you today that God is speaking to you saying, you may feel like this suffering is just weighing you down, but it's got a process that God is trying to work. Yes. So can we truly be relevant? Because my friend David, this guy, he lost 160 pounds in 1 year. It's like, wow. This guy, he was almost 300 pounds. He was over 300 pounds. And this process he went in over a year to where now he's lost over 160 pounds. I love what he posted recently. He said, don't focus on the end goal, focus on the next goal. And that helps me because sometimes for me, when I focus on that end goal, and I'm like, God, it's so far away. How can I do that? How can I make that? Instead, I focus on the next goal. And part of this next goal is understanding that David is relevant to you. If you're new to church, you're like, this guy was thousands of years ago. How can this be relevant? Well, David, he wrote many of the Psalms. And if you're like, okay, Matt, you're telling me to spend time with God this week. Where do I spend it? Maybe get in the Psalms. Because David, he wrote this. I mean, you think about him on his journey. When he wrote, it said, God, the person that spends time with you is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Do you want to prosper? Yes. I mean, do you want to prosper? Yes. Okay, I want to prosper. David said, here's how you prosper. You spend time with God. You get in his presence. David wrote in Psalm 5. I mean, you can imagine this, out in the pasture, and he's like, God, what are you going to do today? Are you going to take me somewhere today? And he wrote, in the morning, Lord, you hear my voice. In the morning, I lay my request before you, and I wait expectantly. And this can be your prayer. I mean, you can get up tomorrow morning and be like, God, I want to stay pure. I want to stay pure. You got somebody for me. You got me. Okay, God, I'm going to wait on you. I'm going to wait expectantly. You're going to help me with this. You've marked me. It's you and David. Psalm 15, where David, he was thinking, God, how can somebody come into the presence of a holy God? I don't deserve that. And literally, this psalm, I call it the psalm of integrity, where David wrote this and said, Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent? Who may live on your holy mountain? Well, maybe this week, you get in your takeaway card into Psalm 15 and you dig into that psalm, and it talks about the integrity of a man or a woman who follows God and says, God, I want you to prepare me in private. I want you to do that. And in Psalm 18, these last 3 verses, actually, would you stand with me? I'm going to read these, and then we're going to read them together. So watch this. Watch this. It says, I love you, Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock. He's my fortress. He's my deliverer. My God is my rock in whom I take refuge. My shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call to the Lord who is worthy of praise, that I've been saved from my enemies. So I want you to imagine David on the sidelines hearing Goliath again, like it's his day. It's his time to continue toward this marking. And in his mind, he's thinking this. And maybe this is for you. You're thinking, God, I want to be marked. I want greatness in my life. I want peace and satisfaction in my life. And God says, I've got that for you. If you do the last thing I told you and you spend time with me. So I want you to repeat after me. I love you, Lord. I love you, Lord. My strength. My strength. The Lord is my rock. The Lord is my rock. The Lord is my fortress. The Lord is my deliverer. My God is my rock. In whom I take refuge. My shield and the horn of my salvation. My stronghold. I call to the Lord, who is worthy of praise, and I have been saved from my enemies. And I have been saved from my enemies. Because I'm marked. Because I'm marked. Okay, let's pray. Father, I thank you for this encouragement.